This tutorial will be teaching you how to finish off the end of a Jesus prayer cord with either a twine cross or a cross and tassel. So the supplies that we will need, once you have your Jesus prayer cord finished, I will show you how to finish off the different ends, just to show you an example of some different types of Jesus prayer cords. Here at the top we have one that's knotted that has spacers every 10 beads. Sometimes people like that so they don't lose count. The Jesus prayer cord has a total of 100 beads or 100 knots. So this has the spacers, it has the cross and the tassel on it. And then we have another one here that has, instead of the spacers, it has the wood bead. So you can add the wood bead every section of 10. The knots are made the same way. And then just a tassel and no cross. That's another option. And then the next option would be to do just the cross and no tassel. Here we have a knotted one with no spaces at all. Sometimes people like that. They like the challenge. And then I'm showing one here with the beads. So there's 10 sections of 10 and it has a knot every 10 beads. You can also do the beaded version without any knots and just, I call it continuous, do the continuous beads. Typically when I add the beads, whether it's as the spacers or not, I add one bead at the end. This was a special request that someone had without the bead at the end, but typically I do add the bead at the end. So the first thing I'm going to do is show you how to make the tassel. The cord that I'm using is the number 18. I usually get it from Hobby Lobby. It's the Artiste brand number 18 Nylon Twine. Make sure it's not the cotton one. It has to be the nylon twine. They call it a crochet thread. So you can find it in that section. And sometimes you can find it online by other brands, but I do like working with the Hobby Lobby Artiste number 18 Nylon Twine the best. So that's what we're working with today. You do want to make sure that you have a sharp pair of scissors when you're cutting these for the tassel, because otherwise there'll be too much burning going on. And as you can see here, I have my candle ready to go. And I'm going to have my lighter as well. And so what you want to do is I have a couple of strings here that are about 2 feet long. One is going to be for the cross and one is going to be for the tassel. So if you're doing the tassel, you need one string about 2 feet long. You're going to need a string of another color that's about a foot long, more or less. I mean, you can judge it and change it as you go along. And on this one, you do want to make sure you have tape on both ends, and you'll see why in a moment. And then of the color of the tassel, you do want to cut 5 pieces. They're about 7 inches long. We'll start with that. And again, you can cut them longer or shorter as you see fit. So in order to make the tassel, we are going to take these 5 pieces of string. Now I use 5 because then that'll give you like 10 ends on the tassel, but you can make it thicker or thinner with using more or less strings as you see fit. This is just what I found to be best. So you're going to take your string of the other color and just turn it top to bottom like that. Then you're going to take your 5 strings and try and make sure that they're not overlapping each other, and just lay them down pretty much centered as such. And you're going to take this end, hold this down, and just fold it over as such. We're going to take one of these strings, I'm holding that down so it doesn't move. We're going to take one of these strings and we're going to go ahead and make what I call a 4-turn knot. So you do want to make sure that you already know how to make your knots going into this. So 4 times around, and the reason I make this longer, I'll explain in a moment. It's so that I can differentiate which string is which, but again, you can decide how much string you want to use. So a 4-turn knot is 1, 2, 3, 4. Go ahead. And again, if you need to learn how to make these knots, there's other videos. They're called Hail Mary knots, Our Father knots on bigger, smaller knots. The 3-turn knots that I use for these are called the Hail Mary knots. The bigger knots I use in between here are 5 turns. Those are, I call them Our Father knots. So you can learn how to make all your knots before you start. But here we're going to do a 4-turn knot. And again, you can change it to bigger or smaller depending on your liking. And then you're going to take these 2 ends and very carefully lift it without your strings falling out. And you're going to feed that through here before you take it off your finger. And very gently pull. And if it moves off center, you can kind of fool with it, but just kind of be very gentle with this here. You're going to pull this very gently through the knot as such. And it doesn't really matter at this part how far down you go. You do want to leave yourself a little bit of extra space as such, right? So then you're going to start to tighten this knot, trying to make sure that these strings don't overlap each other. And again, at this point, you probably are starting to understand why these other strings are longer, so I can differentiate between the tassel strings and my working strings here. You're going to want to tighten this, but not 100% tight just yet, because at this point, you can now take these green strings, and this is why we use a different color so we know what we're doing, kind of give it a tug to make this nice and even. Kind of look at the bottom. You'll be cutting a lot of this off, so it's a little uneven. It's okay. If it's really badly uneven, you want to straighten it out a little bit. Okay, but give that a tug. You don't want to leave quite that much room. You want to leave enough of a hole that you can feed a string through. So you don't want to leave yourself too much. You don't want to leave yourself too little. So I would say something that looks, let's see if you can see that kind of like that. I would leave about that much. Once you get to the position where you feel like that's where you want it to be, then you can take these two ends and give it a nice tight tug so things don't fall apart. Straighten it out a little bit, position it. You might want to monkey with it a little bit back and forth. And then at this point in time, you can go ahead and take this one out. Make sure you leave yourself a nice little hole to work with. And very gently, you might want to give it a push. And see, you can see how there's a nice little hole in there. Okay, so we are going to add this to the end of this piece here. So this is going to be, sorry, I'll add it to the end of this one here. This is going to be a cross and tassel. So we made the tassel. I'm setting that aside for now. We'll get back to that in a moment. So this one here, we've made our Jesus prayer cord. Like I said, because it's beaded, I added the extra bead here. I'm going to make the cross. So for the cross, what we're doing is the top part of the cross is 4 turns. On the bottom part of the cross is 5 turns. So I make the top and the bottom before I add the sides on there. Sometimes these get a little tangled on the end. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and make a 5-turn knot to finish this off. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Twine crosses are not my favorite to make because they are a little bit temperamental. Very slowly make your 5-turn knot so that things don't crisscross over each other. And this, you want to make it very close to the top. You're going to leave just, I call it a nail space, in between the 4-turn and the 5-turn, just enough room to get another piece of string in there for the crossbar of the cross. So very carefully work with that, twist it, play with it back and forth until you feel like you have just a tiny little space in there as such. Then we will go ahead and make the crossbar on this. So I'll take my other long string and we're going to just tie it like you tie a shoelace, just the 1 turn. But when you position this, you'll position it right into that little space that you left behind as such. Okay, and on the crossbars of the cross, it's 3 turns on each side. So very carefully, got to keep them close. 1, 2, 3. Feed it like that, because I don't have a tape on the end of that. And very carefully put that into position. Now on these crosses, you do want them to be as tight as humanly possible, because if they're not, they get really wimpy and they start to sag and they don't really look like a cross anymore. Sometimes I will even use a tool, almost like pliers, to get it even tighter because my hands are not super strong and I don't like to put extra pressure on my wrists and shoulders if you're doing a lot of these. Another 3 turns on the other side here. Pliers do help a lot though. Either they're beading tools that are kind of like pliers, needle nose pliers, regular pliers. Okay, so for now I'm going to use my hands and make it as tight as possible. Once the arms are in place, then you can kind of push and tighten the top a little bit and pull and tighten the bottom a little bit. So now we have our cross in place and we want to add our tassel that we made. And the tassel, I just used 3 turns and I try to keep it as close to the bottom of the cross as possible. So 1, 2, 3. I'll feed that through. And just like you would add, let's say, a crucifix or something on the end, instead we're going to add the tassel. So this now is going to go into the hole. This is why you want to make sure to have tape on the end so it's easy to work with and boot it through. And then we'll go ahead and go back up that knot just like we would add on a crucifix. If you don't know how to add on a crucifix, there's also another video on how to add a crucifix on the end. You might want to watch that. And so we are going to tighten this little 3-turn knot as tight as we can to the bottom of the cross. When I do this, I don't tighten it completely here at this point, because if I do, when I go to pull the string, this is going to twirl and get all weird. So you want to put it in position, but loose enough that this can still move pretty freely. You'll see I have my fingers down here on the end of this string because that keeps this from getting all twisty-turny. So keep something inside here as you gently kind of pull the string up until you get to this point. Now you can kind of gently hold on to the tassel, hold on to the knot, gently pull it up. And as you're doing this, you can go ahead and kind of tighten this knot a little bit. So you want it nice and snug. And now you don't have too much room to pull. It shouldn't twist too much. Give that a little tug, and there you go. Now the fun part comes with the cutting and the burning. So we know with this twine that if you don't burn it, if you cut it and don't burn it, it falls apart. So please make sure that you cut and burn. So let's cut what we need to cut. The ends of the cross. You're going to leave just, oh gosh, maybe not even a 1/4 inch maybe on the end. I always like working with the darker colors because when you burn it and it turns a little blackish, it doesn't look that bad. So on the tassel, and again, this is why I use the longer strings, because at this point you definitely want to know which one you're cutting and burning and not accidentally cutting and burning the tassel ends. So having those longer cords really kind of helps me distinguish what's what. That's the long one. And then with the tassel, you can decide how long you want this tassel. Truthfully, I usually eyeball it, and I mean, just to give you an idea, I'll measure it for you. Let me see. I would say somewhere between like 1.5 and 2 inches is probably the right length, but I usually just eyeball it. So you can go, this is going to be the end of my tassel right here where my hand is. Be careful when you cut it and don't snip your knuckle. A lot of mistakes can happen, and I've made them all, so including cutting my own fingers. Don't do that. Okay, so very gently, carefully snip them as straight as you can so that when you burn them, it'll be easier. And there we have all of our scraps. So I recommend that you have like a piece of paper or a tablecloth or something like that if you need to set your item down while it's still warm, because otherwise you will get burn marks on, when I say tablecloth, the plastic tablecloth. I have a cloth tablecloth here, so that's why I have a piece of paper so I don't get any burn marks on my tablecloth. So then we're going to go ahead and sorry, my knot on my tassel got a little bit weird. Just going to fix this really quick before I burn it. When you burn it, you want to be very careful because once you put the fire out, it's still hot for a little while. And if you touch it with your fingers, you accidentally touch your fingers, you will burn yourself. So don't do that. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and this end here, when I finished it, I already burned that. So that part was already done. So the end of the cross, I'm going to go ahead and burn that. And sometimes this string, when it's burning, it will continue going once you pull it away from the fire. So make sure to blow it out if you see that it's still burning so things don't fall apart, because it'll burn. It can burn right through and the whole piece will fall off. So be very careful about that. So the ends here of, I don't know what you want to call this, the holder of the tassel, when you burn those, use your finger to kind of pull them away from everything else, because you don't want to burn all of this. You just want to burn the string, right? So be very careful with that. And when you burn it, you just want it to burn to the point that you kind of start to see the end, I want to say mushroom, like it starts to kind of round a tiny bit. And that's where you want to stop it. You do need to make sure that it burns enough to leave like a little mushroom. I don't know if you can see that in the video there. But the end, you do want it kind of roundish, because by doing that, it leaves like a little ball, and that operates like a stopper so that things don't fall apart. So same thing with the ends of these here. You do want to make sure that you burn it enough that it's not going to be able to continue to fall apart. You can see how the string is twirly. So there's a couple strings that twirl together in there, and if you don't burn it enough, they start to unravel. So with the tassel, you'll see that I'm trying to kind of separate them from each other so I can burn them gently one by one. And you just are going to burn them enough, like I said, to see that little roundness start to form. And as soon as that starts to form, if you can see that, that's going to operate like a stopper so that they don't unravel. And you may need to reposition them in your hand. I got really lucky this time that I was able to do them all kind of in one blow, but a lot of times you may need to stop and reposition them a little bit. And then after you do them and you straighten them out, you could sit there. I mean, I don't know how particular you would be about them being exactly even, but you could fool with them and burn them more, trim them more to make them exactly even. But truth be told, for a tassel, that level of evenness, I guess, if you want to call it, is really fine. So again, how particular you are, with the specifics, it's completely up to you. And then on this one here, I'm going to finish it off with just the cross and no tassels. So the cross, you're doing it the same way as we did before. The only difference is once you add the cross, you cut the end and burn the end of the cross, and then it's finished there. You don't have to continue to add the tassel. So I'm sure that'll make sense now that you've already seen me do this. So again, with just the cross, you would stop it here, cut and burn it there. So that is how to make the Jesus prayer cord and adding the tassel. And if you have any questions on that, please feel free to leave it in the comments and I will be happy to answer them for you. Hope you enjoy.